Yeah.
I was out doing something last night. She was with the kids pretty much all day, and she did dishes, and they were sitting around. And there we are, warmed up some leftovers.
I'd like to call to order the regularly scheduled board meeting of USD 464 for Monday, August 9th. At this time, would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, in terms of the agenda, the item one, I would move that we amend the agenda. Item 1.4 will be removed. The Girl Scouts have canceled their event and there's no longer a need for that. And then for action item 5.7, Lauren has some information on a plasma cutter for the shop class. So with that, is our motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Second.
All right, all in favor, please raise your right hand. All right, motion carried. Move on to Lori, you will be up next.
Okay, I'm just here to talk about the budget that we're going to be publishing in the paper. So this is just the approval to publish, and I handed out to each of you Code 99, which just goes over, you can kind of see, I mean, there's a lot of information, but the mill levies, we were able to keep them all flat. You can see the general is going to be 20, LOB will be 11.148, capital outlay at 8, and then bond and interest, we were also able to keep fairly flat at 23.252. So the overall mill levy actually went down just slightly. And so on the back of that is the revenue neutral rate. That's the new section that we will also be publishing and having a hearing on next board meeting. And that we just have to publish that so that everybody sees that we are exceeding the revenue neutral rate. And I kind of touched on that last month, but I can certainly answer questions about that or explain more if you need to. Along with that, in keeping the bond and interest mill levy flat, because state aid changed suddenly this year, we are going to have to put some funds into it, and luckily we have the bond premium money. So state aid on any bonds authorized after 2015 dropped from 9% to 1%, and then any bonds authorized before 2015 dropped from 41% to 37%. So that's a total of a 12% drop in state aid on our bond and interest. So that hurt. But luckily we have our bond premium, and so we're going to be injecting $2.5 million into the bond and interest fund, which allows us to keep that mill levy flat. We did speak to Piper Sandler, and they think that that's enough to keep it. It should be good for the rest of the bond. Just injecting that money. So that was not foreseen, unfortunately, but luckily we had an option.
This is the change was a legislative action, and it incorporated Fort Leavenworth as receiving state aid. They received no state aid, and that was the issue at hand a year ago, and they didn't change it. They didn't make the adjustment to the formula, and so that's the result, was the drop in state aid. Now they're probably going to revisit that perhaps this fall, you know, at the House and the Senate. We hope they do, but there's no guarantees that base state aid or state aid for bond and interest will change. So that's why the adjustment was made. Okay.
we had that discussion with Dustin, I guess, at the retreat, about why that went down. I guess the one question on the revenue neutral, I mean, the 20 mils general fund were required.
We have to,
I mean,
yeah.
so the difference, I mean, if you look at the bottom line,
Yeah.
I mean, it's about half that is what we're required to collect 20 mils no matter what. So we have no control over that fund.
Right, we do not.
Any other questions for Lori on the?
Yeah, later you're going to, I think, be voting just to approve us to publish this in the paper, in advance of the hearing, which will be the September meeting. So if
We
you
won't
have any
need-
questions.
We won't need a special
Right.
board meeting to approve the budget or the revenue neutral rate.
Yeah, we'll just do it on the September meeting. And I'm happy to answer any questions in between, but I do believe you're gonna be voting to approve to publish it tonight. No questions?
Questions? All right.
Okay.
Thank you,
Lori.
You might want to, Lori, you might want to introduce Rebecca to everybody.
Oh, sure. In case you don't know, this is Rebecca Presta. She is the new business manager, effective last month.
Wow.
So she's been in training.
And I think we owe you a thank you for all your years of service, and sad to see you go, but understand why you're leaving. Appreciate your hanging on and helping transition.
Rebecca will do a great job.
Thanks, Lori. Aaron?
All right. Good evening. I'm here to give an update on the high school bond construction project. So just starting off with the budget forecast and update. Everything for the total project GMP is holding steady with the construction GMP and the soft costs and contingencies. The current contingency amounts are shown here along with forecasted amounts. So the district control GMP contingency, they're forecasting down, it currently says at 783, forecasting to 710. There are a couple changes and issues that are being priced up by the contractor. Soft cost contingency continues to hold steady, as well as the district project contingency outside of GMP. The facility improvement allowance was used previously for the previous enhancements approved, and we will discuss those additional items later tonight. Schedule-wise, substantial completion, still on track to hit a November 29th substantial completion of the Learning Center addition, which will turn that over to the district for furniture and move in over the Christmas or holiday break. Weather days, this month or in July, there was one less day than contractually allowed for used, so good status there. Overall, there have been 6 days over contractual used, but that has not made an impact to the overall schedule. They've been able to make those up. So key deliverables and inspections. Later this week, we will be walking with McCown Gordon and DLR doing a punch list on the summer work that was completed. So that is the hallways around the gym and the TPAC, as well as the parking lots that were redone this summer for those to open back up and welcome students and staff in just a few days. And then all the district purchased appliances for the Learning Center addition are still scheduled to be delivered on August 31st. And just just keeping a close eye on that with some of the procurement issues that we've been seeing. So other upcoming key milestone dates, after the punch list this week, we'll be reopening the north and southwest lots with a new curb gutter and asphalt configurations on 8/13. Building F, which is the actual two-story addition of the Learning Center, is moving along. We've got paint upcoming for both the first and the second floor there. Working with Barb and her team to schedule a state health inspection for the new kitchen in late November, just before turnover. And the TCO inspection for all the buildings in the Learning Center is scheduled for November 5th. As I mentioned, FF&E install on the furniture will begin installation on December 1st, and the move from the West Campus will begin the week of December 20th. So then the project will very quickly move on to the next phase in demoing the existing East Campus in early January and starting the fitness and wellness edition. Start seeing footings and foundations of that in March. McCown Gordon continues to have a great safety record and had no lost time accidents or injuries on the job site. So that's been going really well. So other outstanding issues and changes, just a little update on the summer work. I'm sure you guys have driven by and seen everything going on out there on the outside of the parking lots. The drive entry widening has been completed. On the interior, the final floor polishing and paint is happening. And as I mentioned, we'll be doing the punch list in those areas. So they're looking really nice and bright new floors and ceilings and lights. So just a note on turning over the new parking lot areas for the site landscaping. The new irrigation system is tied in to the new building addition. So that system won't be live when these parking lots turn over here in a couple days. So the team's decided that with the warm temperatures, it's not a good idea to install bushes and trees and all the final landscaping. So they're gonna kind of throw down seed and let that go for a few months and keep that maintained until the temperatures cool and they can get that in. So just when that isn't done here in a few weeks, that is why they're afraid that those will die off without the irrigation. McCown Gordon continues to work on and procure materials. We have not had any issues on the project so far with procurement issues, which is a great testament to the hard work they're doing, because it's been an ongoing problem in the industry for sure. So they're beginning to work on procurement and already have several materials purchased for the athletics edition that starts at the end of the year. Furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Got an email actually this morning that all the furniture for the Learning Center has officially been ordered. So that should work out well with the timeline. Continuing to have bi-weekly meetings with Lauren and Mark and the staff at the high school regarding purchasing other equipment and furnishings that the different programs need for their spaces. The move management contract that the board approved awarding a few weeks ago has been executed, and we're scheduling a move kickoff meeting at the end of August to start to plan the details out of how and when that move will be executed, and getting some information out to the staff on packing and getting rid of extra things before that move. parking lot and traffic flows, so with the new parking lot configuration opening, we've been working with the high school's administration on site logistic plans for them to communicate out to the staff and students before the school year starts. There'll be some different traffic patterns that people will probably have to get used to for a few days or weeks. And those will again change in January when the east side of the parking lot shuts down for that addition over there. So that communication will continue as those changes occur on site. And the last item here is project design enhancements. So that's kind of moving on to our other presentation here. So I attached to the update just some photos of them in the interior. They've got the painting and ceilings and diffusers going on in the high bay area, the main entry. The new the north parking lot out front, the asphalt and striping going down, and then they're starting to work on the concrete patio and sidewalks in between the new cafeteria and learning center. And then just about complete with all the exterior brick on the north side of the canopy main entry there. So I've attached a list of all the updated approved project changes for use reference as well. So if there's not any other questions, move on to.
Questions for Aaron? Anyone? Drew's on vacation.
Not on the phone?
No.
So you want me to roll right into the enhancement log?
Yeah.
Okay. So as we've been talking over the last few months, and I sent this out a week or so ago to give you all kind of an advanced look at what would be proposed today. So what is under consideration is this middle column here, the approved August 9th. So these items were selected based on the schedule of the ongoing construction, and if approved tonight, would be integrated into the overall project at the high school. And if they are not approved, because they're in this column, means that the project would continue to advance past the point that would be very cost prohibitive to go back and accomplish these. So that's why they've been chosen to be brought tonight. As we've talked, this has been an ongoing process with the administration, the staff, the design team on items associated with the general scope of the bond project that were maybe left out of the initial scope due to budget concerns and making sure that we hit a mark. And because of the advantageous pricing that we got at the time period this project bid, took a hard dive into what could be put back into the project that would improve the overall finished product. So I'll just jump right in. Most of these have to do with the West Campus renovations. That was a pretty undefined scope as the bond was developed, and kind of held back in certain areas on that, like I said, to meet the budget. So we went back and looked at a couple items here. So line item number 8 is very minimal, just adding a few additional offices that surround the new board room, which is the current library, painting those and kind of cleaning them up along with the adjacent rooms. So that's $2,000. Ceilings, so there was kind of had to draw a hard line of where to do full ceiling replacement in the West Campus. So one of the late additions to the scope was the wrestling room addition into the West Campus. And at the time of bid, the scope did not include, I think I have this out over here. Yeah, okay. At the time, the scope didn't include the ceilings, full ceiling replacement in the wrestling room. It was going to be patched where walls were removed to expand this area. So this line item is to do full ceiling replacement, including new lights and diffusers. In the wrestling room, the IT room, which is this room up to the top, and then just a few other miscellaneous rooms that got overlooked in the initial scope. Just adding this hallway in to have a full connection entering from the exterior hallways into the West Campus. This line item also includes this canopy on the east side here. The underside of it is currently a kind of a tectum panel that's kind of sagged over the years. So the original scope included replacing that canopy underneath on the north side with a metal ceiling. And so this would just be picking up this one to make it match what's being done on the north, as well as putting new light fixtures. So this is where the wrestling would enter in through this doorway, so it just creates that nice entry into that new room.
Is that all like ceiling tile stuff, or?
Yeah, so I'll flip back here. Seems like a large dollar number that is mostly light fixtures. So,
LEDs, I guess?
Yeah, the same light fixtures that are being used throughout the rest of the high school renovations. The pricing that was presented in this document back in July, I highlighted this in red because it has gone up a little bit, and that's because of light fixtures and a little bit ceiling costs, but the county board did go back to their contractors and re-verify this pricing since it had been, they priced it originally back in the end of May. So that is, I'll flip back here real quick to go along with that. I believe you guys have seen this. Sorry. Pointer doesn't want to work here. So this was a rendering DLR did of the wrestling room. So this shows what it looks like with the new ceiling and the new lights. The existing lights are the older, called troffer style. They have the kind of squares in them. They don't put off quite as much. Put off more of a yellowish light. They aren't LED. So this kind of shows you how that really cleans up that room with the new ceilings. Oh, sorry, I was wrong. That canopy I was mentioning is the second line item, or this next line item, number 10, for $8,500. And that's to match that wood canopy. Line item number 11 is replacing the existing VCT flooring in the corridors to match with what is currently specified for the north corridors around the admin area. So a few images here. This is the existing flooring in all those hallways in West Campus. You can see there's a couple areas that, whether it's fully replaced or not, will require some maintenance or just wear and tear. So this is all of the purple areas. this hallway here is currently being done in VCT around the admin hallways. And it would be picking up these purple corridors, so you have all corridors matching. This isn't a great representation of the flooring and what it looks like, but it's a vinyl tile, kind of gray. So this is what the hallway looks like right now along the district offices. Basically, what is being proposed for the rest of those hallways. So last line item here in the West Campus is flooring replacement for abatement. So after the abatement survey was completed, there were a few rooms a few areas that aren't otherwise getting renovated as part of the West Campus scope, but were found to have asbestos in the mastic of the VCT tile. So it doesn't have to be necessarily abated because it won't be touched as part of the other renovations going on. But because that building's gonna be empty and being renovated, it seems like a good opportunity to go in there, clear it out, get rid of it, and put down new flooring. If you ever renovated those rooms in the future, you have to either vacate the building or do an enclosure to abate that asbestos. So it's areas in red, the vestibule, the existing fax classrooms, and the commons, cafeteria commons area and adjacent corridors. So the cost to put down new flooring in those areas once it's abated is the $30,000 that is listed here. So any questions on those before I move on? Okay. So then jumping down to site items, there's two separate items on here. The second one was kind of added after our discussion at last month's board meeting regarding the site lighting down on the east access road. I'll start with the north property fence and sidewalk. So again, this price increased just slightly. There was an increase in the fence pricing. It's aluminum, so aluminum has gone up. And from the steel that was inside the reinforcing in the sidewalk. Okay. So what is included in the cost here? The yellow highlights. What is going on? Okay, so the yellow highlighted dots are brick columns. So they're 6 foot high brick columns. The brick would match the building brick, and they're designed to have a little Tonganoxie T sign on them that would face the 2440. In between the columns, so this line item price is just inclusive of fencing from this corner yellow dot here back around to the front. When I go back to the other sheet, there's a second price that would extend the fencing all the way around the backside of the field. But what's being considered now, because of timing and the work going on with this site, it's just the fencing along this northern portion. I included a photo. This is just down the street. I'm sure you guys recognize this. It's actually only 4 foot. In the picture is a 4 foot column and fence. What's designed here for the high school is a 6 foot, but it just gives you a visual representation of the column and fencing that's being proposed. It also includes a little bit of landscaping. I know it's hard to read, but those little dots would be bushes and grasses that kind of frame that new drive entry. And then the other item that's included in the pricing, zoom in here a little bit, is a new sidewalk that extends, that would connect this new north parking lot across the entry all along the front and connecting over to the sidewalk at the field here. So McCown Gordon will be putting a sidewalk of some sort in as a temporary measure when they shut down the east side of the building so that there can still be safe access to the field. So this price is I guess a bargain because it's really just, it's not the whole cost of the sidewalk, it's just upgrading it to a permanent type construction and making it a little bit wider than they would put in for a temporary measure. So this was kind of brought up as we were, as a team, discussing how they had to put in something temporary, thought, hey, it would really improve that connection to the north parking lot as well as the new parking lots that are over on the west side of the building, coming all the way across there.
We've already got fencing from the drive to the west, right?
No, that's open. From that,
State fence is there.
there
No,
won't be a
there's
fence.
no,
There won't be a fence from that entryway west.
So what's the need for the fence?
I mean, it's a bit of a barrier, but it's also a visual piece. It's attractive. It helps, I think, just the overall vision of that whole facility. Is how we look at it.
so right now, there's chain link fence here.
We'd have to go back in with a chain link if we didn't do this. There's no, they've taken all that down.
They took the state fence down.
Some of that state fence is still there, isn't it, Mitch?
Yeah, from about where the business ring is to the east, still.
To the scoreboard.
The state, from here to the west, there was no state fence, there was kind of some bollards with some chains in between that were on the Tom Knox's property.
But you're not west of the drive.
Right,
So east of the drive was always state fence.
It was cable.
Because the
No,
posts
it's-
had been washed out for
Yeah.
years.
Oh, east, I'm sorry.
Yes.
You're right, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
Now, west of that drive was the cable and the post you're
Right.
talking
Correct.
about.
yeah. Yeah, so
Yes.
the existing chain link and the base, the concrete base of those, yeah, they're
Absolutely.
washed out. They tore part of that down right now to do all that new grading and adding the riprap and drainage in. That's part of this project. It's torn down about halfway up here. So,
And Chris, I think another piece of this is we want to put in a fence that's going to be there for many, many years. I mean, it's not going to be temporary. It's one that will help enhance that whole facility.
So where is that fence being installed in relationship to the current fence?
in the same general plane.
And we're sure we got the drainage fixed? I'm
As
asking,
much,
I
as
mean,
much as can be fixed within your property.
I would say it's much improved,
Yeah.
but there's still a low spot, Mitch, isn't there, over west or east?
Further east.
Yeah, I'm not sure where it sits now, but they filled it in. The fencing line set lower than the ditch line a month ago. It had to be reshot at this point in time. That's a KDOT gate.
6-foot fence versus a 4-foot fence? Just aesthetics, I guess.
Yeah,
It was just the decision I think we made to go with a little taller fence.
so, so that's what's encompassed in that line item.
It also says sidewalk extension of the crosswalk. I know that's something we talked about. I don't see that on the diagram.
We weren't mean
Yes.
across the road.
Yeah, I thought we were
Sorry.
taking a sidewalk up to the road, the extension that goes up to the road.
No, we couldn't do that without going through KDOT and completely ripping out and revising that signal station, that's up here.
You have it still listed on 17.
Yeah, so that, what that is this little piece here. So it's this sidewalk, and then this little piece here was not, in the original scope. But in putting in this sidewalk, it was just a connection, and they took it out right up to the property line, so it could be extended out there in the future if the state ever came through and did revise that signal and made it ADA accessible, you could connect it. Okay. So the last.
Hey, Aaron.
Yes.
Other than the sidewalk, were there any of these that were a significant savings to do them now versus later?
Not necessarily with the fence, although, yeah, I mean, I think the fence portion of it could be done later, carefully, to not wreck the new sidewalk, but, in terms of the West Campus items, yeah, if it's not done with the renovations of the West Campus now, there would be pretty significant savings to do it now versus coming in, because, so for example, the flooring in the hallways, if you left it VCT now, and wanted to come change that later, they're still gonna go through next year and replace the ceilings and paint all the walls, so then you're coming back in and ripping up flooring. So there's just more protection than possible repair. Same with the wrestling ceiling. If you came back in and tried to tear it down later, maybe not as much cost as would be more headache for what's going on in planning, but, and then again, the abatement, the flooring abatement, there really wouldn't be too much of a cost difference to do it later. It's just that issue of having to either negatively pressurize or empty the building to do it, should you ever need it later.
Is there a sidewalk that's going in on the other side of the practice field? So this one goes on the north side, so on the south side, like if you are coming to an activity, a guest coming to the stadium, you know, going to a soccer game or whatever, and you're gonna park in that parking lot, then I'm just trying to visualize usefulness. So then you could walk to the right and go down the one sidewalk and to the left and go down the other sidewalk, and then you could be not trampling on the practice field as you're going to the stadium. Is that, and like the band that goes back and forth, and they could talk about the lights.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if I'm following what you're asking, I
I've
think.
seen it, that was
So,
Last time when they talked about the lights going on.
if you park up here in this north lot, to get over to the stadium, you have to, you know, there's not really a sidewalk that connects you down this road. You have to get on here, you come down here, and then get on that sidewalk and go over.
But there is a sidewalk
There's
on
a
the
sidewalk
south
right there on
side.
Yeah, there's a sidewalk down here on the south.
Right.
Yeah, so if you park right now, if you park in the north lot, yeah, you walk south along here and then go that way. Or the new sidewalk would allow you to come out of this lot and go straight across here.
I was just thinking for, you know, safety of not walking on the road when that's a narrow road anyway, so then traffic and then people going back and forth, so that now if it did exist, people would have two different routes that you could go to and from the stadium on
Yeah.
a safe sidewalk.
Yeah. And the current path isn't unsafe or, doesn't dump you off into a road necessarily. You have to cross the road, down here, versus coming straight across there. Okay. Moving on to the last line item. So when we spoke last month, and what I went ahead and included in here was just kind of going back to the beginning a little bit, on this east access road. So, starting back at the beginning, this was the original design. I'm sorry, my computer's really not liking me right now. Trying to make it too much. We're gonna just read it. Okay. So, during the original design conversations, the original scope of the project as it was being put together, only had this road being refinished up till this point. So everything east of there was not even being milled and overlaid or touched, no new parking, nothing. At the, kind of the 11th hour, as we continue to talk about making sure that the roads and the parking lots and the parking counts were there, and right, there's a late decision to add an alternate that added a little bit of parking on this road as well as, replaced the asphalt. So added this parking and then additional replacement and parking that's shown here. So that was originally what was called alternate 2 in the GMP that was bid. About a week before finalized the GMP pricing, McCown-Gordon put in the temporary parking stalls that are there now, the gravel, and realized that we had an opportunity to actually get even more parking along there. So instead of pricing this design, the alternate number 2 GMP allowance that was approved by the board and the overall GMP project, was for paving and parking in these highlighted areas. This was not fully engineered or designed because the decision was made a week before board meeting, so it was listed more as an allowance. Once it was approved, went back and the design team began actually engineering how to maximize that parking. So as they got into looking at grades and curbs and gutters, this is what they ended up with. Required a little bit more revision to the grading to get some of these extra parking original scope, but I think is definitely needed, if you look at the condition out there. It also added a little bit, more riprap, to help the drainage in this area. There's kind of a steep grade right there by the multi-purpose building. So that's where we got to today. So when we talked last month, there was kind of two different prices. County Board was going back and pricing this engineered design versus their GMP allowance, which was loosely based on this red document. They honestly kind of admitted there were probably, in their haste to get that number together, they probably missed a few things that they should have included in that. So their number is, for this final design, is coming in about $40,000 over that number that was in the GMP. They have agreed to use their construction contingency to cover that. So it's still a project cost, but they are taking on that liability. So that's kind of part of this discussion, I guess, not actually on the enhancement list as it is being absorbed into the GMP and not a change order. The other part that we were discussing last month was the power. So as I presented last month, there's a $75,000 ad for lighting and data conduit associated with that final design. And there were some really good questions from the board last month, and I put together some additional diagrams that will kind of break it out and explain it a little better. So what's shown in this is, in the blue is the current lighting conduit. So as part of the original design, you had 2 street lights out here. The conduit came out of electrical room in this gym addition and extended out to those 2 conduits. The yellow is the data conduit, or sorry, the fiber conduit for the current design. So what we had, go to the next one. So you can see it's the same blue and yellow lines here. And what I've added is this orange is part of that 75,000. It's approximately 11,500. That is extending conduit for fiber over to the press box. That was originally part of this project enhancement log as a separate line item, but found it was originally at $20,000. As we reworked all this layout, this path brought that price down a bit. So that's that section of it. The red is fiber, the revised routing for the fiber conduit to get to the multi-purpose building. So multi-purpose building currently has fiber run to it. It was using an existing piece of conduit that, so originally it was coming this yellow line over here, and then was going to use an existing conduit that ran on this side of the road. In talking with Forrest, if the routing of that has to be done, that fiber has to be rerouted prior to tearing down the existing east campus, because that's where it's fed from. So if we don't reroute it first, we lose fiber to that building. So in order to do that, the team determined, we don't know where that existing conduit's at. The elevation is going to conflict with the new road. So that's why this conduit moved to the south. And just expanding that existing conduit, because I don't believe it's going to be usable. So that's where this additional red length comes in. Instead of using that, just shifting it over here. And then the black is the power to the proposed additional light, street lights. So as we talked last time, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 proposed added lights on this road. They are not required. They are a suggestion, a best practice suggestion to provide consistent lighting along that road that you'll have everywhere else on the campus now. That road lighting and conduit is about $40,000 of that $70,000 cost. I think Kaya, you'd asked about coming out of this multi-purpose building, and there isn't enough power to feed all that lighting from there. And even if you could, it would really only save you this small section because you'd still have to feed it all the way up to this light. So, the other part of this is there's a small light here that lights the monument sign. If the board elected not to add these street lights, that light could come out of the multi-purpose building, and that cost is actually covered by an allowance we had in the GMP for the monument sign. So that's really not part of this equation. So it's really $40,000 for the lights, and the $23,000 is really kind of has to be done in order to get the fiber over there with this new road construction. And then the $11,500 gets you a pathway to get fiber to that press box, which has been a request of the district for ease of having internet out there and recording broadcasting games. I have that right? Okay. So, any other questions on that?
I do have a question.
Yeah.
So right now, there are 2 lights that sit on the backside of that field house. So if you're down there at night, then those 2 lights that are on, they're on the field house that face the road. So they do, the road's pretty close to that, so they do provide some light to that. So I'm just trying to visualize so that, do you know where those lights are? Like on that? No? Okay. Well, anyway, so
Mitch, you know exactly where they're at?
Yeah, I'm marked on the other side, the corners.
Yeah.
well, I guess my question is, there's 4 lights proposed, but because of those 2 lights that do shine on the street there, is it possible to cut that down to 3 or cut that down to 2?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think anything's possible. Again, it's not like a code requirement or anything to have any lighting along there, so it's really, this is the engineer's recommendation for what would provide you consistent lighting levels with the rest of the parking lots and drives.
So just for clarification, that last light that's in the corner of where the V is, the black V, right?
Yes.
So
right
that
here.
light, if you're on the street and you're turning in, where is the entrance? Like, where does that light sit in relation to where the parking is for the field house?
You're
Because
talking
the
about
parking
lot.
lot's not,
Yeah, that parking lot comes kind of off the corner of this building here. So it's like where the dumpsters sit, or like right here, there's a sidewalk that comes on the building. So yeah, I'd say that the edge of that parking lot
It's
is,
back off of Main a little
kinda
bit.
right there.
That's not the corner,
yeah. Main Street is actually down here, and there's this, pie shape. I know it's really hard to see up there, sorry, the lines are really light. But Main Street's out here, and then this line I drew is kind of that existing parking lot. It might be like there.
okay.
You don't wanna stick
I'm-
out went too
I got
far.
it. She drew me a picture.
Okay. Okay, so flipping back to here and summarizing all the different items in West Campus, if you total all those up, is 170,000 and some change. And then the two site items we discussed between the fence, the sidewalk, and that street, the street lighting, and the conduit, the fiber conduit, is approximately 205,000. So the total of all the items on the list being proposed for approval tonight is 375,000. So to go back to the context on this, updated contingency log. The top line item, you guys have seen this before, the top line item is what McCown Morton controls within their GMP allowance. So they still have, just over, well, once they absorb that, cost for the roof, they'll be, just under 900,000, 880,000 in their GMP contingency, which percentage-wise is well ahead of the percent complete of the project. Not out of the woods yet, but in good shape. The owner controlled GMP allowance, we talked about before we started out with $1 million, we were at 780. That was the one I forecasted down to about 710. So that's what is remaining there. There's still 414,000 in the soft cost contingency and 1.89 million in the district controlled contingency that has not been used yet. And then the 3.8 million that remains in the facility improvement allowance that we set aside after the GMP bid results. And that is what was used for the previous enhancements that were approved by the board.
So the 2.5 million into the bond and interest fund, is that reflected in any of these numbers?
That's the bottom.
That's this bottom line, so that is when Lori spoke about the bond premium proceeds, that's this, I think, I don't remember the number that Justin said.
2.5.
Well, but there's 3.8.
3.9.
Yes, it's 3 point, yeah.
Yeah, you guys are using 2.5 now. So that's below the line. And I think the board has discussed and agreed that that's not being considered for use on anything that's going to be used towards the no levy items. So, per previous discussions, that this facility improvement allowance line item is what would be proposed to be used for anything that the board agrees to go forward with tonight, up to that 375,000 out of the remaining 3.8 million. So about 10%.
I have a quick random. I just got a text that people that are listening from home can't hear. So I don't know. Forrest, I don't know if there's any volume that can be turned up or.
So, I know that some of these are kind of an either or maybe partial. So I'm happy to stick around to the action item portion so I can answer any questions or.
Yeah, why don't we do that, because I know there's,
Yeah, I know
you're just getting started with your,
What?
you're just getting started here. We got RFP and,
Yeah, okay.
or unless there's any other questions on that list of items for Aaron.
What percentage are we in the job overall?
Time-wise or dollar-wise?
Dollar-wise.
Are we 50% yet?
If you let me sit down and look, I can tell you before the end of the meeting, or in like 5 minutes.
Okay.
I was on vacation for a week, so I forgot that number already, Chris. I knew it when I looked at the pay apps last week.
Right. That's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Are you gonna,
You wanna cover the RFP for the HVAC while you're out
Okay.
here?
Yeah, I think, did you share that with them, Lauren? Okay. So working with Mitch and Lauren, and others, went through and kind of updated the, previous, RFP that was put out for preventative maintenance. Crossed through all the equipment that has been demoed through the renovations and, broke it up into, each campus. So every bidder will provide a different price for the elementary school, the middle school, and the high school. That can be either evaluated separately. We have also asked them to provide any savings that they would propose if they got all three or two of the three. As we've discussed, there are some firms that are probably don't have the qualifications to maintain this building because of the difference of the systems. So we've asked them to address that through the RFP. We'll also ask for a proposal on a more in-depth monitoring, off-site monitoring of the control system for the elementary school to be more proactive in responding to the VRF, the intricacies of the VRF system. And also through the RFP, we'll be asking them to propose a solution and a price for the high school, the remaining high school equipment replacement. That doesn't have to be part of what is awarded, but that way it gives the district an idea of what those proposals would look like.
and what we're referring to is the TPAC and the East Gym HVAC systems.
So we're putting that in with our RFP for the service.
Yeah, as a separate line item, clarifying that it is not award of the RFP doesn't mean they're awarded that project, but just demonstrating that they have the knowledge and ability to do that project if they were selected. And the current term would be just for 11 months, so it would run through next summer until the new building units come online. And then those proposals would be reevaluated to award for longer term.
Anything else on the timeline for TPAC East Gym HVAC replacement?
Yeah, so, that was the other part of putting that in there, so you'd have some idea on a cost and what it would take to fix that, so that could be, put up for consideration if that's something that the contractors feels advantageous to do, on a certain time period based, evaluating that against the cost of the, current maintenance of those units. So that's what we've asked them to kind of comment on in their response.
Our hope is to bring the board a lot more information about those replacements in the next few weeks.
So, the intent is to get that sent out, tomorrow, and, if there aren't any questions or concerns, and have responses due in 2 weeks, and be able to evaluate those and bring a recommendation at next month's meeting.
Okay.
Any other questions, thoughts, Aaron, on all that? Thank you.
Okay, so I'll stick around.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, if you could, I think that'd be helpful.
Okay. Thank you.
Mitch?
I don't have a whole lot for you guys, just kind of a quick update on summer and is where we're at facilities wise going back into this school year. I think we had a pretty productive summer as far as meeting a lot of the needs of the building principals, and a lot of the small requests that they have. Our custodial team, the maintenance teams, did a pretty good job of just tying up a lot of small projects, especially here at this campus and the middle school. We didn't do a whole lot of work on the high school for obvious reasons there. We were able to get a lot done as far as building cleaning, kind of farming some of our high school staff out to the other buildings, just not having the need for them in that current facility. But, you know, as far as moving into the school year, we've got a couple little things we're trying to finish up as far as, you know, landscaping and making some things look nice here, going back into the building. I know the big question is the HVAC, and, you know, kind of how we feel on that. As far as the summer's going, we've been able to handle a lot of issues in-house. I had a whole boatload of them this morning at 10 a.m. As I stand here in front of you right now, they're all fixed and working. So I feel really good about where we're at. We've engaged some of our trade partners just to kind of help support that system. Moving into, you know, what feels like a pretty warm August and probably September, and just kind of keeping them around enough that if something happens, you know, they're understanding it while we award this RFP and move into that portion of the contract with them. But as of right now, in all our buildings, we feel really good about you know, where we're at. You know, addressing some concerns with staffing, just like everybody else is, but we're really not too far off in regards to that going into the year. We've got some really good leads in our buildings that are picking up in a lot of areas that we're missing out because of staffing. You know, going into January of 22, we'll need to reevaluate a lot of needs as far as the new high school building, obviously adding quite a bit to our plate as far as custodial goes, but we're in the process of working through some different options there as far as hiring or outsourcing, things like that is kind of what's on my desk right now. So other than that, I don't have a whole lot for you guys unless you got any questions.
It's not really your area, but do we know the construction out here on the Evans coming in?
Their timeline is, their timeline is to have that finished before the start of school. They didn't take into account enrollment, which, I talked to the assistant city manager and the construction manager down here. So yeah, it's temporary. They put a plate over what they're working on. That's what most people probably drove over tonight. But they'll have it in good shape by the start of school, is what I was told.
Other questions or anything for Mitch? Anyone?
Thank you.
Thanks, Mitch. All right, thanks everyone for your patience. At this time, we'll entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
Make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of approving the consent agenda, raise your right hand. All right, motion carried. All right, with that, we'll move into patron comments. Sorry, a lot of stuff here.
And thank you all for your patience as we went through that process.
Sorry. Is there any, I've got two individuals that have asked to speak. I know there were some people that came in later. I don't know if they got their paperwork turned in. I do remind everyone that, you know, I know this is both individuals want to talk about the mask policy. If possible, we ask people to group together. I mean, you are limited to 3 minutes. And anyway, with that, I think Karen Hershey, you're welcome to come up to the podium. And I mean, I thought we had a microphone, but apparently it's maybe not working.
Well, I got a text from somebody else that said they can hear, so.
Yeah, I checked. I've been texting, so we can hear it fine. It's just moved it over a little bit, so hopefully the mic will pick it up.
The direction that I should speak. Okay.
Thank you.
So, first off, yes, I'm Karen Hershey, and I looked today at the gating criteria. And I want to applaud you for making masks optional for both the green and yellow rather than just assuming the worst and mandatory masks right off the bat. Something though to consider, I subbed for school several years ago and raised 2 children in public school and homeschooled 1. And it seemed like every August, September, October, kids got sick. It just is. Everybody getting together, and then again when the weather gets cold, kids get sick. There's allergies. And that said, the whole concept of masking, once things get bad, some things about masks to consider. Opinions are all over the map, as I'm sure you on the board all have different opinions. Teachers, staff, parents. But something that I'm finding, nobody can guarantee that masks will prevent anybody from getting sick. And nobody can say that without masks, people are gonna get sick. You just can't. And with all the testing protocols, I talked to a couple of people asking about the cycle thresholds that are being used in testing. Sent an email to KDAG to find out what they're using. Because if you take a vaccinated person and do a low cycle threshold test, even if they have COVID with a lower cycle threshold, it will show up negative. If you take somebody who's unvaccinated and test them at high, they may be totally symptom-free, may not have it if they were tested at a lower. But if they're tested at a higher cycle threshold, it will show positive. Likewise, so the reverse. KDAG said, I asked about labs. Do the labs that are in, the information is infused to KDAG, are they all using consistent cycle thresholds? The answer is no. This is from KDAG. There are labs that are using, as they put it, fringe numbers. And so what they're drawing together to test is an average. We can all-
Your 3 minutes is up. I can give you a little bit of time to wrap up if you
Okay.
want.
All that to say, when kids start getting sick and leaning toward the red, think about that nobody has any guarantees. What is best for one child, one teacher, may not be best for everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jessica Hartgrove.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Jessica Hargrove. I'm interested in your guys' opinion on the mask mandate, having to, mask our children. I mean, I guess I'm curious to know what you guys think and how you feel. And I know there's a lot of nearby districts who are enforcing the mask mandate. And so I'd like to hear from you if that's okay.
It's not a question and answer.
It's not a
We'll have a
question and
vote.
answer?
I mean, if you have some thoughts and things you want to share with us, but I mean, we'll have a dialogue here in a minute.
No, I
now,
understand,
election.
that's fine. I would like to say that, having children in multiple buildings here, it is a concern of mine. I don't really see my 5-year-old, starting kindergarten having to wear a mask all day. I understand going to the doctor's office and it's really the hospital doctor's office, medical facility, having put on a mask for a short period of time. But asking, a 5-year-old who, you know how it goes, they're off the wall, gotta keep them in line, pull it up, over their face. I'm not very interested in that, I know that it has been discussion, there's been a discussion between members that if the school were to mask or make a mask mandate, that there may be talk of homeschooling, taking our children out of public school and homeschooling ourselves. I did have an incident or a situation last year as well where my daughter, forgetful, the mask was on the dashboard of the car and she had gotten out of the vehicle and went to the entrance of the building, and there must not have been like a replacement of masks or just a stock of the mask there at the door. I don't know exactly how it went down, but she felt the need to chase after me, exiting the parking lot, like hollering for me. And she does not have a cell phone. It just so happened that my sister was driving by at the same time and saw her. So I returned, she called me, I returned to the school and she was waiting out front. And she felt like she could not enter the school building because she didn't have a mask. And so, what would have happened if my sister hadn't been driving by and my daughter, was sitting out front? I mean, you know what I mean? I know situations happen. I did talk to her, like, you can go in and ask, like, to use the phone, so on and so forth. But how is the school going to handle? These are the questions that we have, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. With that, we'll move into reports. Lauren, or was there another one?
No, PB.
I know there was two. I didn't have the third one.
Oh, good. It's here. Okay.
Go ahead, Lauren.
Well, the board knows that at this portion of my report, we were going to talk about the COVID response. And I have sent all board members my superintendent's report. I listed both options for consideration. I also want the board to know that considerable effort from the administrative team and myself and Tanya went into the gating criteria. We worked on that for at least 2 days or two afternoons. I firmly believe that going with the option one, which is mask fully optional for students and staff to start the school year, there's two main advantages that I see. And one of them, of course, is the promotion of the social, emotional well-being of all students and staff involved in the educational process at USD 464. And secondly, I firmly believe that having masks as optional is the least restrictive learning environment for students and staff. I also believe very wholeheartedly that there's a lot of precautions that our administrative team and staff will need to take to provide a safe environment as best we can as we enter the schools. I also recognize some of the other sides of this. I know that CDC is recommending masking. I know that. We do know that. There has not been a public announcement yet by Leavenworth County in that regard, as far as, but I know if you were to ask or get a response that they would promote masking. I'm talking the Leavenworth County Health Department. Some other things to consider here is we as an administrative team will strictly adhere to the gating criteria that I presented. And I know that's going to be discussed because there are some concerns about the percentages and maybe the numbers that are involved in the criteria. But I also want everybody to know that, if those gating criteria numbers result in red, that we have to pivot and be masked, both indoors and for both students and staff. And the other thing to throw out there is we've already been mandated by the U.S. Center for Disease Control that all students and staff that are being transported by our students, or by our buses and vans, are required to mask up at this point, and that is tied to school funding, federal funding, basically, special ed title services. Last thing I'll say about my opinion on this is the USD 464 district leadership team and building principals support this option. The other option, of course, is to fully mask. And you've all had a chance to read it. I mean, it's been debated at school districts all across the country, and of course in Kansas. You can look at school districts nearby, and everybody has their own opinion, and they're making a lot of decisions tonight, and I know that. So I guess my question is for the board. I mean, the board knows how I feel about it. You know how my administrative team feels about mask is fully optional for students and staff. And I appreciate some of the questions and phone calls I've got over the last 3 days. It was really important to me to have those conversations. I don't know if it helped clarify anything, but I think it helped us understand a little more about this process. So any questions for Tanya, myself, my building and leadership team? Quite a few of the members are here. Cody, the athletic director at the high school, is here because contact tracing will be a big part of this process. So this is a chance. Is this the right time to just?
Yeah.
I mean,
why don't we finish your report?
Okay, let me come back. Okay. Facilities and grounds, you can kind of see that. Mitch has put together a list of equipment that he's going to need as we move into the building. A lot of this is pure zone type equipment. A lot of it's going to help him in time and effort with all the hallways that are going to be taking place. When you guys, if you've had a chance to walk through our new facility, you already understand that this is going to be a giant undertaking. And my plan is to bring a lot of this back to the board next month, and also talk with Aaron about which some of these could be taken from bond. We just haven't had that discussion yet. Transportation, I'm outsourcing as best I can. Jill will stay where she's at. We're going to try to get as many of the buses and vans off the middle school, elementary parking lot as we possibly can. There is an opportunity maybe to move some of those buses south of the CTE parking lot, which is where they originally, some of the spare buses were. And then maybe get a few more buses over here by the water tower, and then disperse as many of the vans as we can, just to try to make up some room out here for any events. The only other thing I forgot to say about Mitch is also looking at a utility truck that we need with snowplow. We're going to have considerably more snow to move carefully. We got a lot of curbs. We're not going to be able to just push snow to the west into the practice field anymore. So it's going to take a little more effort. And I just mentioned I'm still working with KSB. We'll set up a date for our mission statement review, probably in September, when things slow down a little, I hope. The master plan is the same thing as far as with Amber. We might be setting up a meeting with the district site council, Tanya Strong members, for their input, as maybe the last week of August, or after Labor Day, to get that restarted. And of course, you all know about our back to school event on August 20th, which we're looking forward to. Okay, that's my report.
Anything for Lauren? Not Tanya?
All right, mine's pretty quick tonight. I just have an update for you on the things that are going on in August. It's a very busy month. We have on-site enrollment going on now for those families who cannot enroll online. Our kindergartners will enroll the 11th. We start new staff orientation Thursday. We have a good group coming in that we're excited about. Then we'll bring all staff back in on Monday the 16th. We'll have breakfast and professional development that day. The 17th we'll also have professional development. We've got a lot of things that we have planned for that in the buildings. So that's going to be a very busy time. August 18th is work day, and then the first day of school is August 19th, and that's for 1st through 6th grade and 9th grade. That's a half day. Everybody else will come back 1st through 12th for their first full day. On August 20th, we'll have the big Tongi tailgate barbecue, back to school barbecue that night, and then 23rd, first day of school for kindergarten will be half day, and then their first full day will be August 26th. So lots of stuff going on. I'll have more of a report on professional development and some data next month.
What are some of those topics for professional development?
Map data, how to use map data, panorama. We're going to take a look at our panorama data for last year and the changes that we're going to make, and then using that data to inform how we use the playbook and some of our new curriculum. That's a lot of what I'm doing. I know our buildings have a lot that they've got planned on. Casey, remind me, your block scheduling. Thank you. We have some other things we're bringing. Lots of different back to school. Getting the year started for the buildings.
I mean, the breakfast.
Yeah, I'll talk to you about that.
But I mean, if anyone's available on the 16th who wants to come to that, I mean, I don't know if you want to send something out.
I will, yeah, certainly the board members are invited. Jim has been good about giving his speech, getting everybody fired up, being back.
That's it.
All right, with that, we'll move into action items. 5.1 is approval of the budget. I think Lori took off. I think everyone, there wasn't any questions on that. Unless there's any other comment, I'd entertain a motion to publish the budget.
I make a motion to publish the budget.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries. The budget, did you get that, Audra? 5.2, approval to send out RFP for district HVAC preventative maintenance. Again, unless there's any questions or comments, I'd entertain a motion to approve action item 5.2.
Make a motion to approve, send out RFP for district HVAC preventative maintenance.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, raise your right hand. All right, motion carried. Approval of bus purchase. This one you're gonna have to elaborate on a little bit,
Okay.
Lauren, since I don't think we talked about
Right.
this.
So the strategy is I have secured a 2018 sped bus plus a 12+2 wheelchair accessible with air conditioning. We needed that. That is because of the amount of students in need and just our routes. We're spread pretty wide, and so we have that under a 7-month contract. We talked about that. It's $1,000 a month. We haven't even seen it yet, but we're getting it from Midwest Bus. That'll give us a little bit of time to look at the vehicle to see what kind of shape it's in, because they're asking purchase price of right at $50,000, and you can buy a brand new one or lease a new one for about the same price. So they don't have the prices on the new 2022 12+2s yet. So they're just like everybody else. They don't have any. They're running way behind, even with buses. No different than a lot of other things that are going on in the automobile industry. The 77-passenger bus. This is our normal. Our normal routine over the last 4 years. So this would be our 1 yearly purchase of a 77-passenger bus. It's a state bid, and it's the same price as actually the last 2 years. Same 77-passenger route bus. It's not used for activities, but for route.
So the action item is just to approve just to purchase a new 77 passenger.
Yes, just the 77. That's all it is, and the price is where it is, and it takes about 7 months to get it.
And that was budgeted, right?
Yes, that is budgeted. Thank you for asking.
Are there any other questions on action item 5.3, approval of the bus purchase? Anyone? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
I move that we approve item 5.3 through Midwest Bus.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion carried. I guess we didn't amend the agenda on this, but item 5.4 can be tabled because that's no longer going to happen. Item 5.5, approval of district enhancements. This was the items that Aaron presented, and the little request is for this several items that total $375,000. I'm sure there's some questions or comments on this.
I'm concerned about the fence. It's a large price tag. I'd like to see that we've actually fixed the drainage issue. I think we could wait on the fence. One opinion.
Any other comments? I'm agreeable to the items for the West Campus. I think they need to happen, and the lighting down the road, but I guess the fence kind of concerns me, I guess, at this point in time as well. But any other board members have any thoughts or comments?
I'd like to look at the cost of the 6 foot versus the 4 foot and kind of compare that to see, do we really need 6 foot or?
I'd ask Mark, when we talked about the 6 foot versus the 4 foot, was it safety? Was it security? Appearance? I can't even remember. Mitch, do you have any? I think we just came to a conclusion, so we'll definitely look into that.
I'd have some fear that the 4 foot, some high school children will try to scale that on a regular basis and damage it.
I think that was.
But I understand. I also would like to see the cost difference. Any other thoughts or comments? Entertain a motion on action item 5.5.
I move that we approve action item 5.5 with the caveat that we remove the fence from approval today.
I second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, raise your right hand. Okay, motion carried unanimously. Andre?
Would it be appropriate for me to ask a clarification on that approval? So when you say remove the fence, are you still want to move forward with the sidewalk? Or that, are you saying that whole, the fence and the sidewalk was all on price?
See, they were going to put a temporary sidewalk in
For parking?
for parking and access to the field.
But you said the sidewalk was significantly cheaper because of some of the.
Do we want to put in a better sidewalk now and then worry about the fence later?
Honestly, that whole line item could probably be tabled to next month, and we could come back with it with the alternate fence price, and just, it'd probably cleaner just to rediscuss.
If we could do that, I think that would, if we could get some kind of details on that before we commit to that sidewalk.
Did you have an answer to Chris's?
They do 40% is spent
Completion.
dollar-wise. 40% of the total 51.4.
So we got a little ways to go.
Right, but also remember that 7 million of that is unassigned contingencies, so you take
Hopefully.
that out and currently, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
All right, item 5.6 is the draft grade gating criteria that was presented and discussed by Lauren, and I know there's several questions on this and a lot of interest from others. I'll open up the floor for comments, thoughts, questions.
Lauren, could you clarify the state law that was passed about going remote for everybody?
Okay, and Tanya can help with that too, but as the Senate bill.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senate Bill 2134 basically states that we're limited to 40 hours of remote learning by law. And we're required to track that. And quite frankly, if we have to have a student go home for quarantining, we would probably send their work home and not count those hours. I mean, we would do the best we could with just sending home a packet of information for them to work from.
Would it be no different if they were going home sick with the flu or
Right.
anything else?
It would
It would function the same way.
Right, but it could be for 10 days. I mean, that's your extension piece on that. Is there anything else you would add to that?
We would reserve using that remote option for if we had to close an entire building, which we hope is not likely. So, using that 40 hours, which would, get us maybe a week's worth of remote learning. We hope we don't ever have to use that.
But to clarify, if we had to use more than 40 hours, we cannot go remote. We are closing the school.
The state will not allow us to go beyond that 40 hours of remote learning if we have to use that. So what we would do is we would lose funding. If we had to close.
That's the penalty.
Yeah, if we had to close beyond the 40 hours that we can count for remote, then we start losing funding.
But would the 40 hours count toward, would anything beyond the 40 hours count towards the hours thresholds to graduate kids?
I mean, I think that's a good question. I mean,
Well,
there's,
that 40 hours that we use can count towards graduation, but if we're closed and we don't have any more remote hours to use, we can't count any of that time.
as we talked, Justin, we would have to extend either use snow days or extend the school year to make up those hours. Because it's a state law. I mean.
Well, we all know education is better in person, on site, so we hope we don't ever have to go to that option this year.
This is a huge discussion item with Kansas school districts because everybody's in the same boat in this regard. As I said, I don't know if it's going to change. There's going to be tremendous pressure to try to change that law, but I don't know when. I mean, it's an unknown.
Can you also clarify my understanding is if people are masked and have contact with someone that's
Cody.
positive, that the quarantine rules are different.
Okay, Mark, go ahead. Mark, Cody. This is what they deal with constantly, so.
You said that question again?
So my understanding is if we were to mask and someone was positive that was masked and came into contact with someone that wasn't positive and was also masked, that the person that wasn't positive does not have to quarantine per the CDC. Is that your understanding as well?
That is my understanding, and that's how it was last year.
And if we weren't masked, what happens with quarantine?
If the individual is vaccinated, it would be as if they were masked. If they're not vaccinated, then there are some things in place now where kids can get back quicker than we used to get back last year. I just dealt with a case today where after 5 days, they can test. If it's negative, they can return after 7.
Does that involve the quick test?
No, that was a PCR test.
Okay. Did it help?
So that's just if you're quarantined, that's not if you're isolated.
Okay.
So I probably have a terribly unpopular opinion on this, but I'm going to make a couple of statements. So I think last year worked for a variety of reasons. I don't know whether the masks helped or not, but I think last year worked, and I think getting the kids back in school was hugely important. Given the issues around that we've lost the ability to go remote, I think that really helps drive my decision, right? So we're not, the word remote school is no longer in our vocabulary for the most part. We're talking about closing buildings. And I think when you compare the social emotional risks with masks, which I believe are real, with the social emotional risks of potentially being at home for some indeterminate amount of time, I can't get behind the gating criteria as it's presented. So when I read the gating criteria, to me it says we have to be in red in all 4 categories. And I think at that point we have likely driven off the cliff before we go to masking. So for that reason, I can't support the gating criteria as it's presented. I'm certainly open to discussions about what we can do, but I think that I think the risks outweigh the rewards on not masking, and I don't take that decision lightly. I've traveled the last 4 weeks personally, and I don't like wearing a mask myself, but that's my opinion.
Well, kind of to piggyback off of, Justin, I think the gating criteria was a good exercise, or establishes some good criteria for help us determine what we should or shouldn't do, given the limited guidance we have from other people. But I kind of struggle with, by the time you're read, it seems like we've got a lot of kids and a lot of staff out, and we're going to be able to keep operating everything the way it is. Anything we can do to keep kids in school in as long as possible seems like to be in the best interest to me, because the county criteria, the top 2 are almost already in red, and we haven't even started school. I kind of struggle with it. I know we tightened down the absentee numbers, but just looking at KDHE data that I looked at, they still seem pretty high compared to last year in terms of what schools experienced across the state.
I will clarify on the gating criteria that we will look at student and staff absenteeism daily. The county data just comes out once a week.
Right.
And so it's based on the 2 prior weeks. But we are more concerned personally about our student and staff absenteeism, and we'll be looking at that daily. Also, we'll only be looking at COVID absences. We don't need to close schools down because 20 people are out with a cold or whatever. We just want to look at those positive COVID absences. That would be the only reason we would want to mask up or worry about numbers in the red. If that helps clarify anything.
I guess my question is, do you feel those numbers need to be lowered, those percentages? Would that make a difference?
How many
Either
students
that,
is
or
it?
that you start moving to mandatory masks earlier. Right now you're basically in the green, even if you're in the red in the county areas, because your absenteeism is going to be so low.
For an example, student absenteeism, we have at 5% to be in the red. That would be, 31 kids at the high school, is that correct? So that's just to give you an idea of how many kids that would be.
What would that be at the middle school, Casey?
We'd have to be at 24 kids test positive. All last year, from September to May, we only had 9 positive cases the whole school year.
Calessa, what about
We
elementary?
would need 39 students based on the head count from last year, and we only had 3 positive reported cases in the elementary school last year for students.
High school, how many positive cases did you have last year?
We had about 20 total cases over the course of the whole year for students.
What are some of the safety precautions that are gonna remain in place, with or without masks?
Well, I'll let Mark, the one option we're probably not going to use is the facial temperature gauges. We didn't get any feedback from those at all. But otherwise, I think we continue with all our safety precautions at every building level, exactly like we did last year. Try to social distance as much as we can. We know, let's be honest, it's very difficult, especially in lunchtime, elementary kids in line, to move to the restrooms or whatever. But what other things are you thinking, Mark?
Well, I agree, it's tough to say we're social distancing because the belt's pretty tight in high school, so. I think teaching, washing your hands and continuing those practices, like he said, it didn't do us a lot of good to take temperatures. That didn't give us any indicators. Being outside when you can, using outdoor areas for instruction,
Water bottles and stuff.
water bottles.
Are we missing anything? Casey?
We're gonna maintain, hand sanitizers for every classroom, so when the kids come in, they hand sanitize, and then every kid will also have, like they'll spray a paper towel or something with the disinfectant and wipe down their workspace, so their desk area, their, keyboards, things like that, so each kid will, and they'll do that between each passing period. That's kind of the routine. It worked really well last year. Kids sanitized their hands, kids sanitized their workspace, and it was ready to go for each class. So we'll stick with that again this school year.
And elementary is sanitizing as they enter the classroom, after and before recess. Dismissal, they're still going to be in separate locations.
And I think also just continuing that communication of how important all those items are, especially with the elementary kids. I mean, the teachers can help relate that message. I think it's important.
And I think, the communication to parents and families about if your child is feeling sick, they need to stay home. I do want to clarify something. I said 20 total. To be accurate, I think it's 30. We had 30 all year long last year. And the threshold for us would be 31 at the same time, under this 5%.
Yeah, I mean, based on last year, your absenteeism probably should run in the green all year. I mean, but if it starts to elevate, you're not gonna get to red unless I mean, the county numbers are, the top one's already in the red, and the other one's at 14.8, but that's just off last week's data, they haven't updated. I mean, if we implemented it today and said the yellow was mask required, you'd be at, whatever it is, 7 out of, well, it's 3, 7 out of 4, whatever. It's less than, it's not, it'd be mask optional, you'd still be in the green.
All of last year though, even when the county data was in the red, our student and staff absenteeism was not. It appeared to be, by looking at the data, that most of your COVID cases were in Leavenworth, Lansing area, or even Linwood, not Tonganoxie. We just didn't have the cases here.
But, to go back to Justin, it's different than when you could shut it down to remote versus we're trying to we don't have that option. If you don't keep it slow, you're not gonna face many options if you get to the red.
So this is still a fluid document, right? Like we said last year. So if we choose to try mask optional and we have to begin shutting down buildings, then if it's a fluid document, can't we revisit it at that
Yes,
time?
absolutely.
And make changes to it if necessary.
I think that's important.
So it's not something that we're, like, if we do get to the point where we potentially could lose state funding because we have had to shut down buildings or we've used up all of our remote hours, I think we need to.
But the ship sailed by then. By the time you can react, it's too late. You're reacting, you're being reactive, not proactive.
Well, not necessarily, because you're being proactive in the sense that you're not gonna wait till the very last minute to stop that. You're going to evaluate, as you try it, evaluate what's happening, and then make a shift if you have to. So you're still being proactive, but you're responding to what's really happening. Otherwise, we're making a prediction. We're gonna say that we expect there to be a problem in the school this year. And cloth masks, as the students are wearing them, under their nose, not on properly most of the time. If you do the research about cloth masks too, they don't even stop the particles that a lot of times that would prevent somebody from getting COVID. So they're not 100% effective. And we've never, since COVID has started, we haven't tried the mask optional. Did we have any trouble this summer with summer school? Do we have any cases this summer with summer school?
No.
Yeah.
I would would just rather the criteria be a little more proactive than reactive, and we can adjust the other direction if, if the data, if there's no signs are popping up and the county data is declining, it's gonna take care of itself.
I do think it's unfortunate that we are required as 7 volunteers with no medical experience or education to make a choice that is something that should be provided by a county or a state, really.
Could
But-
not agree with you more.
So I find it really unfortunate that that all school districts have to make this decision. But I think we have to also look at what's best for our community, and what's best for our community may not be best for the whole state of Kansas or even the county as well.
So,
I think, go ahead.
so if CDC says schools should wear masks, state says you're going to not get funding if you don't wear a mask on bus,
Federal funding,
federal funding.
that's state.
But we're gonna ride the bus, and as soon as we come to the building, we're gonna take them off?
We'd have to, but according to federal funding. That's
That's
special ed and title funds.
I struggle with that a little bit.
But
And
if-
safety is our #1 priority, right? We talk about that all the time.
I mean, I know where you're coming from, Chris. It's, a lot of this will be challenged in the next few weeks, there's no doubt in my mind.
It could change before we start school,
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.